What? I'm trying to build a church. Before Dwayne Johnson became The Rock, there was an apostle of Christ who was The Rock. If you're Catholic, you probably heard of Saint Peter being called The Rock. But there's a lot of people that disagree with this statement. Many Protestants claim that Catholics twist the Bible passage in order to prove Catholic concepts like the papacy. Like this pastor who uses Greek to disprove Catholics.
Number 25, Jesus wasn't installing Peter as the first papa. He was being clever. Gotta know just a wee bit of Greek here. Peter is the Greek word petros, a small stone, a little rock.
Very small rocks.
Masculine gender, when we used to actually have genders. And on this rock I will build my church is the word boulder, Petra, a mountain peak, the feminine gender. The boulder is the confession, not Peter. So if I could paraphrase it, Jesus was saying, you're just a little tiny stone, but on this massive confession that was revealed to you by my Father, I'm going to build my church on that. Jesus wasn't saying, go take over my church, Peter. He was using Peter's confession to say, I'm building my church on myself.
So, is that really the case? Did Jesus really call Peter the rock as Catholics believe, or was he just calling him a tiny stone? Speaking of things Catholics believe, if you want more content that explains the Catholic faith, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share our videos with other Catholics. Also, don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any of our videos. So, did Jesus really call Peter a rock? To answer this, let's go back to the passage and look at the original Greek. So, the verse in question is Matthew 16 verse 18, which states, "And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church." The two words we need to examine are Peter and rock. According to non-Catholics, the words used for Peter and rock are so different that they can't possibly mean the same thing. In Greek, Peter is translated as Petros, which means small stone or pebble, and it's a masculine word, while the translation for rock is Petra, which means large, massive stone and is a feminine word. So obviously a big stone is not the same thing as a little stone, and the genders don't match either. So since Catholics don't understand Greek, they are wrong, right? Well, no. If you look at the broader historical context, this distinction in the term rock no longer existed by the time Matthew wrote his gospel. The gospels were written in Koine Greek, which is now known as Biblical Greek. This was a different dialect of Greek from what was commonly used before Jesus' time. In Koine Greek, both Petros and Petra mean rock. And it's not because they didn't have a separate word for a small stone or pebble. They did. It was lithos. So if Jesus really meant to call Peter a small pebble and not a rock, he would have used lithos instead of Petros. But this might not seem convincing enough for some. I mean, it's hard to say there's only one meaning of the word when the meaning depends on which version of Greek you end up choosing to follow. So how can we conclude what Jesus really meant to call Peter? For that, let's look at the Aramaic. This was the language commonly spoken by first century Jews, including Jesus and the apostles. It's even believed that Matthew's gospel could have been written in Aramaic before being translated into Greek, which was the more widely known language thanks to the Hellenization of the empire. So when Jesus spoke to Peter, he would not have used the Greek word Petros, but the Aramaic word Kepha. The word Kepha doesn't have multiple meanings. It just means massive stone. The Greek transliteration of the word Kepha is Cephas. That's what we find in many New Testament passages. For example, let's go back to the passage when Jesus first changes his name from Simon to Peter. In John chapter 1 verse 42, it says, "He brought him to Jesus. Jesus looked at him and said, 'So you are Simon the son of John? You shall be called Cephas,' which means Peter." If you go back to the original Greek translation of this verse, it uses Kepeh, Cephas, the Aramaic term, and Petros. When you look up the meaning of Cephas, it just means a rock. So clearly Jesus was calling Peter a rock. But what if that was just a nickname for Peter and not like a title that we use for him today? Well, we would need to look at how the other disciples referred to him. Now we already see that Matthew and John have already recorded the name Cephas in their Gospels. But another great example of this being a title rather than a nickname among the closest disciples can be seen in the letters of St. Paul. St. Paul always referred to Peter as Cephas. In the first letter to the Corinthians, there are 3 verses in which he refers to Peter as Cephas. But how can we be so sure that Paul is talking about Peter and not some other disciple of Christ? Well, we can look at his letter to the Galatians. He mentions Peter on 3 occasions. The first, he clearly says Cephas, James and John, who were reputed to be pillars. This would of course refer to none other than Peter, James and John. Or again, when he talks about the time he opposed Peter during the first council of Jerusalem when they were debating the circumcision of Christians. So, Paul clearly referred to Peter as Cephas, the rock. If Jesus had just called Peter a pebble only to show his unworthiness, I don't think Paul would go around calling Peter by that name to just make fun of him. Paul uses this name because it was the title that Jesus had given Peter. It signified his authority and position among the disciples, and so Paul addressed him as Cephas. In our TikTok, Snapchat and Instagram generation, it's probably more common to name your children after the most trending names, or if you are a celebrity, then after fruits, directions, cities, or any other random name that catches your fancy. But in the Bible, the names always had meaning. They showed your purpose, the mission that God had in store for you, the plan for your life. When God changed Abram's name to Abraham or Jacob's name to Israel, it wasn't just to keep up with some trends. It showed how God was going to bless them and use them for His glory. For Peter, Jesus changed his name from Simon to Cephas or Peter from the moment he was called. And he later reaffirms that same name after Peter confessed his faith in Christ. Jesus doesn't make mistakes, nor does he speak without meaning. So no, Peter wasn't just being called a tiny, insignificant stone. He was the rock. So, what do you think about this? Do you think Peter's name change was significant? Let us know in the comments below. Also, if you like this video, let us know by liking and subscribing to our channel and share this video with all your friends. Until next time.